It's all right. It's going to work. Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. The first item is the fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if a fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. They exit through the reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. The webcast is meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. And a reminder about your mobile phones, please switch your phones off or turn to silent during the meeting. Thank you. And please indicate when you want to speak. As I've said to you last time, I sometimes can't see who everyone is, so please bear with me as we go on. Okay, so the agenda this evening, the first item is obviously apologies and substitutions. We understand that Karen Watts isn't here. Are there any other? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carr sends his apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Any other apologies? No, okay. So we haven't got Councillor Watts and we haven't got Councillor Carr. Thank you. Right, so we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, I'll take silence as golden. And urgent matters. As far as I'm aware, there are no urgent matters to discuss, so we've completed that item. The next item is the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 14th of June. Are there any comments on accuracy, or do you agree that I sign them? Happy? I will sign them before I leave the meeting. Thank you. So let's get to the meat of the agenda. And this is our Green Infrastructure Strategy Progress Update. And obviously we have got Paul Johnson here who's going to actually introduce the paper. But I will ask Councillor Tomlin firstly to introduce it. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So I'm pleased to introduce this report for you, which obviously Paul will go through with you. But this is going to provide you an update on progress of the Council's Green Infrastructure Strategy, started in 2018. It sets out a framework for the structure and coordinated management of the green infrastructure assets within our borough. So this is years 3 and 4 that we're reporting on this evening. We have seen a number of achievements. A lot of them are listed in the paper. Over £1 million has been allocated within the capital programme. It was spent on play and open spaces across the borough. We've got our new ranger team and we're developing the team. They're delivering the nature conservation improvements on sites, providing more extensive support to volunteers and conservation groups. They've got some new toys to play with as well, and it sounds like everybody in the borough wants to have a go with them, so something we've got to work on. The declaration of a local nature reserve at Blackdown Ponds and Crabtree Plantation. We planted 1,729 trees. Partnerships working with Hampshire Isle of Wight Trust and volunteers to deliver these improvements. And then we also have a very strong input now to the local plan policies, the emerging local plan. We've also seen the initial production of the East of Basingstoke Natural Environment Management Plan that seeks to improve green infrastructure and link a number of the parks in the borough out from the centre of town towards the east, open parks are our open spaces, and we're starting to look quite seriously at that now. And also we are assessing what potential we might have for carbon sequestration on our land. This is all part of the climate change emergency. So I would like you please to note that things have changed in the years since we started this GI strategy. And in terms of it'll form a focus of the work that we're going to be doing in the upcoming year and the future. We have now got the Environment Act, which sends us instructions. There's a publishment of the National GI Framework for us to look at. And of course, internally, we have now declared our climate emergency and ecological emergency and our air quality standards. So that is driving everything we do as well. So we'll be starting to assess what might be included in an update of this strategy, as it's a live document, which we'll be looking at during 24-25. The main priorities will be to publish a new biodiversity strategy for the borough. We have to do this. Our target is hopefully by January 2024. Ensure our local plan update includes very strong policies, particularly with, again, biodiversity net gain, the various mechanisms there. We have to do this by September 2023 for planning and development, and obviously the sites and developers to work to. We are working in partnership with Hampshire County Council to develop the local nature network recovery strategy for Hampshire. We're going to review our council tree policy. We're obviously going to review this document. And again, very importantly, we're going to strengthen the work with our partners and volunteers on the nature conservation projects throughout the borough. And we will enhance the parks and open spaces with new facilities funded through our capital programme. And we're going to be busy. So over to Paul, who'll take you through the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. That's very comprehensive there, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming along tonight. As Councillor Tomlin has set out, this is an update report that sort of like gives more detail on the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years. The report is structured. It starts off with a summary of achievements. Then there's a table setting out all the actions from the action plan that was appended to the local plan. The green infrastructure strategy, and then there's some data that sort of like illustrate the work that we've been doing. Clearly, as Councillor Tomlin mentioned, one of the big drivers over the last couple of years has been the Environment Act, which was enacted in November 21 and provides legally binding targets for environmental improvements in air quality, biodiversity, water, resource efficiency, and also waste reduction. This report really concentrates on the biodiversity elements there. There are a whole number of things that we will be obliged to produce and provide for biodiversity and nature conservation that will help to sort of like, reverse some of the declines that have existed in various areas of biodiversity. This will relate to the government's 25-year environment plan, which was made under the Environment Act, and there will be a review every 5 years to make sure that the goals and the targets are being met. These will become statutory processes and will include a whole number of elements, which I'll go into a bit more detail about. Firstly, it covers the mandatory biodiversity net gain, which is an approach to new development. And essentially what happens is that as part of a planning application, a site will be given a biodiversity score that sets out the value of the site based on national sort of like guidance in terms of criteria. Essentially, each different habitat will have a different score, then it will be added up. And then what needs to happen is once the development is implemented, there needs to be a plan that ensures that 10% extra on top of the original score of biodiversity value is provided. So say, for example, the biodiversity value of a undeveloped site is 10. After development happens, it needs to be at least 11. So that just gives a rough idea on how it works. That becomes mandatory from November 2023. And obviously this will link into the adopted local plan and policies that are emerging there. However, we have been requiring developers to provide biodiversity net gains already. And Basingstoke and Dean is one of 27% of authorities that have policies in place for that. So we are, ahead of the game there with that. But obviously, as guidance develops on biodiversity net gain, we'll need to amend that or update that as necessary. Another element of the Environment Act is the production of a local nature recovery network strategy. So that is a plan that sets out on a wider scale how nature recovery is proposed to be developed. That is something that is being led on at a county level scale, and I understand that Hampshire County Council have recently been given the responsible authority status, and we are working with them in the initial stages at the moment, to look at how the local nature recovery network strategy might come out. So that's a piece of work that's already been happening, and it will continue. And part of the Environment Act now requires local authorities to meet the biodiversity duty rather than having due regard to them. So that means that we have to set out agreed policies and specific objectives, and to act to deliver policies and objectives there. And we've been continuing to deliver these through existing policy strategies and work streams, but these will be strengthened through the delivery of a new biodiversity strategy, which I'll come on to later. Next item, in October 2021, the council declared an ecological emergency to provide greater focus on protecting and enhancing biodiversity in the natural environment. The response to the declaration is a work in progress. So there's already existing work streams that we carry out that enable ecological issues to be addressed, such as the local plan, working with conservation groups and volunteers to engage and help get the messages across about the importance of biodiversity in communities, and then also delivering works on ground. So things like the biodiversity improvement zone in Hatchwarren and Beckerwood is just an example of that. So works have been already continuing on that, but in order to carry on and fulfil everything within the ecological emergency, the council has appointed a new principal ecology and biodiversity officer, and they are currently working on the production of a new biodiversity strategy. And that is, again, a piece of work that we've been doing and will continue for the rest of the year. One of the, I suppose, in terms of how communities are engaged, one of the biggest things is the establishment of a ranger team over the last couple of years, where sort of like various resources were pulled from different teams within the council to work together to provide support for local volunteers and conservation groups, and that's their focus. So that team is responsible for delivering practical actions from the 15 green space management plans that we have, protecting and enhancing habitats, maintaining, improving access, but I suppose most importantly, and in terms of engaging with people, is providing practical support alongside Natural Basingstoke, supplying tools, training, PPE and insurance. And over that period of time, they've delivered 6,500 hours of conservation work to improve the parks and open spaces. So these are largely sort of like weekly and monthly work events. We also have a corporate working party that runs, or parties that run twice a week between September and April, and that's amounted to over 1,200 corporate volunteer hours. And in addition, community paybacks also provided over 870 hours worth of conservation. In the group, within those conservation groups, we've seen new groups started at Wigmore Heath and Chinham Woods, and there's an ongoing drive to attract new people to get involved with this. And we've also increased the resource to the ranger team to reflect this importance of it. We're also carrying on with our programme of declaring local nature reserves, and have recently declared one at Blackdown and Crabtree. So that includes the ponds where the motorway spur comes off at junction 6. There's some ponds within the woodland at the bottom, and then that carries on up to the open space and woodland at Crabtree Plantation, and that's been declared as a local nature reserve, given its ecological importance and also its role in providing space for people to enjoy ecological beauties of the borough. Also, we have been involved in delivering a lot of projects on site. As Councillor Tomlin mentioned, we've implemented projects totalling over £1 million, funded by the capital programme and developer contributions. So we've seen improvements across a number of sites, including Stratton Park, Moat Park in Chinham, Kingsmill Road and Radford Gardens in Grove, Lyford Road in Norden, and also Whiteditch Open Space and Winkelbury Playing Fields. So these have included new areas of tree, shrub, bulb and wildflower planting, as well as new benches, signs and bins and other street furniture provision to allow people to enjoy those areas more and to improve their appearance and wildlife value. We've also seen a replacement play area at Basing Lime Pits, which was completed a few weeks ago, and the initial feedback that we've had from people is quite positive about that. It's a site that's had a number of issues over time, and hopefully this is providing an enhanced facility there is something that might help to address some of those problems. We've also been looking at a master plan for a network of green spaces towards the east of Basingstoke, including Eastrock Park, War Memorial Park, Blackdown and Crabtree, the Basing Common and Millfield and the Lime Pits. And that's a high-level master plan that looks at the potential that we could release from those areas based on three main areas of focus. So firstly, looking at biodiversity within them, how we could protect and enhance that, the facilities within some of those spaces. There are some spaces where facilities are quite tired and out of date, so looking at how we can improve those. And the third thing that is quite important there is sort of like connections between them. Quite often it's paths and routes between them quite difficult to navigate, but in order to help people use the areas, one of the ideas is that we look to improve those connections. The biodiversity improvement zone at Hatch, Warren and Beggarwood has continued. So we've been running that for 3 years now, and we're starting to get a better idea on how we might be able to manage things differently to improve biodiversity. So what happened there was there's a whole number of road verges and small open spaces where we changed the management to them. Essentially, we rather than cutting them every on a frequent monthly or 3-weekly basis, we sort of like left the cutting to once a year to see what would grow. So after the first year, we did a survey, and there was about 150 odd different species that went up to about 200 or so species. We've had a lower number of species there this year, last year, partly due to the drought last summer. But the whole process has been very good in terms of giving us ideas on how we might best manage land and how potentially we could roll it out in other parts of the borough. And then finally, but not least, the council's got a huge tree stock, over 80,000 trees and probably growing every year, that we are responsible for managing. These are trees on council land. So we are going through a ward inspection programme where we look at trees and address dead, dying and dangerous issues on site. So we've been working in Hatchwarren and Begwood, Buckskin, Southam, Popley, Brooksdown, Tadley, Brighton Hill, Sherborne, St John, Evinger and Winklebury this year. And within that work and across the wider implementation of parks and open spaces improvement, we've sort of like planted, about 1,700 new trees over the year. So this year, these last 2 years have been quite busy, and it's going to continue. As Councillor Tomlin highlighted, we're in the middle of looking at producing a new biodiversity strategy, which we're underway with, and that will include involvement with members over the next month or so. What we're looking to do is get it presented and approved by the end of the financial year. There will be the requirements of the Environment Act that details are coming out slowly from DEFRA as to what would be required to do, and we'll be adding to that as things go. We'll be looking to update the council's tree policy, and then this GI strategy. That was first approved 5 years ago, and a great amount has changed in that time in terms of things like the Environment Act, processes for developing and managing and monitoring green infrastructure has changed as well and improved. So one of the things we'll be looking to do this year is scoping out a potential revised green infrastructure strategy, which we will look to roll out or develop in more detail next financial year. Then there's the business as usual work of dealing with planning applications and making sure that green infrastructure issues are addressed and provided for within them, and the development of schemes on site, and then engaging with partners and volunteers to support this. So that is really what we're up to.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. It's brilliant. Firstly, shall we open to questions? And Paul is quite happy, I'm sure, to deal with any, and Councillor Tomlin might want to intervene as well. So has anyone got a question? Councillor Goss.
Thank you. Really just an update on what's happening, I can never say this word, carbon sequestration, because and is that going to be taken forward sooner rather than later, because that should be quite well advanced already, that area of work, and there's some quick wins in there, and it could be done quite soon.
Sorry, yes. Carbon sequestration, we've just had the final report completed on that, and the next stage is to see how we can roll some quick wins out of that. So yeah.
Have you got an idea of any timescales or any areas that you'll work on sooner?
No, that's something that we do need to confirm.
So the east of Basingstoke, because I know I appreciate that is high level. I've seen quite a bit of it, and I appreciate that. I think it's a good plan, but it's the funding opportunities, isn't it? So what are the next steps? Is that being taken forward in that regard, and are you looking at funding opportunities for that?
Yes, indeed we are. In fact, we had a presentation to the Cabinet, the initial plans. I think it was yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah. So, talking to the consultants who have prepared the master plan for us, it's talking about we are talking with them about putting a bid into the National Lottery. The problem with the National Lottery is a lottery whether you get your grant or not, but we appear to have missed the deadline for the summer, so we wouldn't know about the funding success until I think it was April or something next year. So it's one of these things we've got to look at something to move forward. So what we're thinking of doing is looking at starting with Eastrop Park and the plans there and focus on that one. So we still want the lottery funding, but some of these are quite long-term timelines with needing to get planning, needing to obviously get the funding in place. So in a nutshell, we're at early stages and we have to find quite a large sum of money to do that. But it's the lottery funding is the big one at the moment, but we're looking for others. I mean, Paul, you've got any other comment on that?
No, I think you covered it quite comprehensively, really. Yeah, the HLF funding is going to be a key part of this, and we're looking to see if we can make a bid as part of that. But very early days on that, but obviously we'll be keeping people updated as and when that progresses.
No, thank you. That's helpful. I just wanted to make sure it was a project that obviously was started and that it's something that you're seeing through. And then one last question, if I may. Any comments or any plans for Saunders Field, if anything is happening with there, if that's going to be used as a nature reserve or?
Right. I mean, I think we would love to do everything everywhere. In fact, I went for a walk in Saunders Field. Well, it's not really described as a walk. It's more like machetes at dawn because it's about 6 to 8 foot high in weeds. But we took the rivers, what was it? Loddon Catchment Partnership with us to advise us. But we found where we believe the depression where the water would be was. And we walked along as it became more of a stream, but it's fully overgrown. So the point is, it's now to assess it. So we need to look at a programme of work of looking at that because there's a catch-22 there. I think one is, can we get it classified as a special area? We want to protect it. If you protect it and get it classified, no disrespect, but we have to open it to the public. So we'd have to think of a way of managing it as a public reserve that doesn't damage it. We leave it as it is. So at the moment it's early days. So the answer to your question is on the agenda, but a little way away.
Thank you, Councillor Eucas. Councillor Phillimore, next. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for a great report, Paul. Thank you very much. I don't know if these questions are for you or for Councillor Tomlin, but we'll soon find out. As far as planning issues are concerned, which was more or less your summing up issue, and this might be to you, Councillor Tomlin. It's gone. The previous cabinet allowed nitrate offsetting, which doesn't help the natural environment in specific areas, especially in the River Test and Itchment catchment areas. Is there any plans to reverse that decision?
It's an interesting question. There's a lot of feeling that it would be nice if we could do some of this offsetting closer to home. The nitrate question, obviously, we're dictated to by Natural England and their calculation, and the rivers running to the Solent. The decision to do the offsetting at Eastleigh was made, but it's a question of whether we can step back from that, whether there are alternatives, but we are guided on that rather than it being free decision at the moment. Sorry.
There was one more. It's an observation rather than a question. We've come in for some criticism from nationally from Chris Packham and environmentalists and social media traffic about our lack of ecological support at development control. What can we do to address that?
Well, bit of an advert on August the 2nd at 6:30 p.m. We have the all-member briefing on the biodiversity strategy. Now, therefore, I'm suggesting an education programme. We need, let's put it this way, for the last 8 weeks or so, I've been exposed to some in the planning world, we used to get on a bus on a Friday and go out and have a look around the borough. Fabulous. The borough is enormous and it's full of everything. It's wonderful. I've now been looking at sort of insects and flowers in a smaller area. It's just as exciting and complex. But there is quite a lot of understanding, because biodiversity is very much a science, as well as the pure nature side of it, and understanding what you can do and what you can't do, and very much there is a metric that's used for biodiversity net gain. As a formula, and it's prescribed and it's fed to us, and that's what we have to do. And clearly a lot of it is judgmental. So in terms of that particular incident that you were talking about that made the press, I mean, there are always two sides to a story, but now is not necessarily the time to go into it. But there is guidance, and that's the point, it's guidance at the moment. When it becomes kind of statutory, as it's getting firmer in planning policy, then members will, I wouldn't say take it more into account, but it's always a judgment thing. And I think unfortunately that particular episode was slightly skewed, shall I say, but all in defence. But the answer is we do listen to the biodiversity officers. It's something we have to do.
Thank you.
One more, Chair, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
And I do want to raise this at CEP. I've spoken to Councillor Tomlin in private about it, and I do want to be parochial, like Councillor Uchis was about Saundersfield. The closure of Portals Paper Mill in Overton has had significant effect on the natural environment in terms of water being taken out of the aquifer at the test, and how it's impacted on the local environment. And there are very protected species there that need protected, and we've just had incidents of otters being seen there. And I think that issue needs really to see, could it be a nature reserve, could it be a sink? And we've been talking to you about biodiversity gain, but I do want it raised at CEP.
Yes. No, I agree. You're right. We've spoken. We've had a site visit and had a look. I mean, there's great opportunity. Clearly, there are a number of hurdles. It's not our land, so that's our. Well, it's not our rule. It's the way it has to be at the moment. We can't influence what isn't ours. But if somehow we could work on getting some of that to work, I think that's quite important. And that is actually a big issue, given. I think you said about the amount of water, but what 15 million litres per day was extracted from the river test for the paper mill. It was then used in the process, and most of it was then put back in clean, put back into the test. But now they're not taking it. That 15 million litres has found ways out of the ground all over Overton, and it used to go through settlement beds, I would call them lakes. They weren't very deep, but they were deep enough, but they were lakes. So it was a really good wildfowl natural area, and of course they turned the water off, and now it isn't. So it's a great opportunity, and there's some excitement, but we have to be, I think, vigilant of what happens to the portal site. And absolutely, I think it ties in with our biodiversity net gain. If someone was going to do something to that site, I don't know, but maybe that's a bargaining or a way out that we could use it.
Thank you, Councillor Fillmore. You can ask for it to go on CEP.
I just want to say that that's number 10 on your strategic priorities, is to participate in the test catchment partnerships and delivering priority habitat species enhancements throughout the river catchments.
Councillor Fillmore, if you want it on the committee, as obviously you can ask for it to be on the committee as a member. Please do so. Make sure that it gets in on the work programme. Yeah. Councillor Goldie next, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I might continue a theme of being a bit parochial, though it's next to my ward, not actually in my ward. It's in Councillor Uchis's ward. My question is, where is Old Down in this strategy? we voted as a whole council unanimously to make it a nature reserve. So I have to say I'm really disappointed that it's not in your priorities for this year in order to actually achieve that. It's massively important. It's so significant for the residents down living in the new communities along the A30 in my ward, residents in Kempshott, residents in Hatchwarren and Beggarwood. It's so well used. The council has agreed to protect it. So why is it not in this strategy and a priority?
Within the update, we have said one of the priorities this year is declaration of local nature reserves, continuing the programme for delivering them across the borough. Clearly, Old Down is a priority area that we will be looking at this year to see if we can progress that. So it is a priority for us.
Okay, that is good. I think it would be nice to see it named, either by the portfolio holder or in there, because it has been, as I said, fully approved by council that should be a piece of work that we prioritise. Is there a timeline for that?
Again, that is something that we're trying to finalise at the moment, how we progress that. I mean, typically, local nature reserve declarations will take about 18 months to go through the whole process of kind of like, that's how we found it takes the time to get involved in terms of doing the site assessment, the consultation, the working with Natural England to sign off management plans and stuff like that. Now I'm saying 18 months. There are elements within that we might be able to sort of like shorten. So where we can do, we will do.
So we voted on it a year ago. You've got 6 months left.
So let me just make one answer. You're probably aware in the papers tomorrow there's a question at full council. I will give you an answer then, because so you'll have to turn up. Thank you.
Councillor Vaux.
Thank you, Chair. I'll put three quick ones together. In the Progress and Action Plan, there is reference at the bottom of page 19 of 28 to woodland management. It does say that it's not yet got going, but I was a bit surprised to see that it's about utilisation of woodland through the production of timber products and wood fuel, and I would just like some comments about how that's going to help us when that's releasing the carbon back into the atmosphere if we burn it. Also, I was a little bit surprised under section 7 in the narrative, under the equalities implication, there wasn't reference to access to our green spaces for people with mobility issues. I appreciate it is talked about briefly, as bullet points in the Index of Strategic Priorities, but that equalities implication, that act, I was surprised not to see some specific reference there to the work that we should and need to be doing to make sure that all our green spaces are accessible. And then a final little one, I don't know whether under the reference somewhere or other where you're talking about supporting accessibility to knowledge, the public to GI information, which is on page 15 of 28 in the action plan. Mechanisms for monitoring biodiversity and improving accessibility to the public to GI information. Have you considered the use of QI codes at relevant places to be able to link to web pages to give people more information? Thank you. 3 quickies.
Okay, thanks very much. In response to each of those, in respect of the wood fuel, this green infrastructure strategy was developed in 2018, 5 years ago, obviously, a lot has happened in that time in terms of, acknowledging the impacts of releasing carbon and those impacts on the environment. Clearly, when we look at this, it will be something that we'll be looking at in light of current advice and priorities. So when we do look at that, we will have to acknowledge that where is the balance between looking at wood fuel, or is that outweighed by the impacts on the environment? So it's something that we will need to consider as part of that. In terms of accessibility, clearly that is something that when we have the management plans for parks, and we do look at developments and where we put new facilities into parks, accessibility is one of the key things that we look at. I mean, as an example, play areas, new play areas that we deliver quite often include facilities for people with accessibility issues, and indeed we've put some kind of like panels up at the line pits that sort of like help people with communication issues sort of like talk and sort of like direct where they want to go in those play areas, and we've received some really nice feedback from residents about how that's been used, so that's good. Mechanisms for improving communication, QI codes, that's something that we are looking at in terms of, certainly it might be something that becomes more usable in terms of where we implement play areas, and also interpretation panels and boards that we put up within parks and open spaces that we manage.
Thank you, Chair. So personally, I would like an undertaking that we won't be burning products from our fuel stocks to release carbon back in. I think we need to find other ways of using our woods, and I'm sure we can. So I would like to see that removed. And yes, I've been working with our excellent play park folk on how to make our playgrounds more accessible, particularly for sight disabled children, and there's some really good stuff out there. But I think that misses the point. A lot of our green spaces are about the copses, the woodlands, all sorts of areas like that, where we need to be thinking more about accessibility. It's not just about play parks. It is about saying whenever we visit something that is part of our green infrastructure, we need to be thinking, how do people access this who have mobility issues of whatever kind that is? And I feel that that does not get enough prominence in this document at the moment. Thank you.
Sorry, that's more of a comment than a question. Sorry, that was moving into the next section. Councillor Lee. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Common.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That was fantastic. It's so exciting to hear about all the work that you're doing. I just wanted to ask one quick question. Appendix 1, number 27 says lobbying of Hampshire Public Health Body. Could you just tell me what that would involve, please?
As I mentioned, the in that element of the green infrastructure strategy, that's an amber at the moment, because we do need to do more work with the health bodies to see how our parks and open spaces can help to contribute towards health improvement. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do already in the parks and open spaces, like provision of like outdoor gym equipment, providing open spaces that people can get around, do help contribute to that. I mean, many parks and open spaces around the borough, you see people using them for, running, walking, cycling and other health activities. So we'll be looking to build on those, but, whether or not there's any direct link that we can make with the health bodies that might take that even further.
Just a comment, Chair. There is a little incentive in Bramley, or I think in Bramley, it's fellowship walks, and that's incredibly good for all aspects of mental well-being and even physical well-being. There are different groups who walk at different speeds, but providing the places to walk. And one of the problems is there's not so many places to walk that don't involve roads and footpaths. So it all is part and parcel of that. So you know, things are starting. That was done by a community, but things like that we need to incorporate for sure.
Yeah, I've got a question. Can I ask a question? You were actually talking about the land at the Borough Council land, and what you haven't actually included is the fact that there's an awful lot of land that town and parishes in the rural areas run and provide leisure facilities and play areas and things like that, many of which obviously can't benefit from Section 106 money because they don't have any building. And the fact is that we've lost the ability to bid for environmental improvements because we no longer have a grant scheme to do that. Would you consider that as part, obviously your biodiversity strategy shouldn't, I believe, only cover Borough Council land, but other land that you talk about engaging with other groups. But I know that there are groups in my area, for example, that actually do an awful lot of work on land that isn't Borough Council, but they're not included in your figures because you haven't got the knowledge of that without engaging with them. So would you broaden it a little bit when you're thinking about that?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the answer is, I think, yes, we'd love to. It's a bit running before you can walk, in the sense we can only influence at the moment the land that we have control over. And I think as a second stage, once we've started to get the strategy together for that, then yes, I think there'll be no reason why we shouldn't look at other areas. And then the funding question comes in, as you said. However, it's only money, but you know what I mean. It's something we can look at, but it will, I think, have to be a second priority because we just can't muscle into people's land, as it were, and demand our strategy. But it is something we need to implement and we need to look at. That's for sure.
Okay, as a follow-up, obviously some of the land does actually belong to the borough, but because there's no Section 106 money, there is no plans to do any development of small areas where you could do some environmental improvements. And in the past, you could actually bid for a grant pot to try and do something, but that doesn't exist anymore. So obviously there are areas, as you can see from the report, where there are zero things being added. And I think that's a shame because I'm sure there are places in all those communities that could benefit from some environmental improvements.
We are planning to, if you like, it's quite a large piece of work, but catalogue what we have on our land. So that would actually come into that because it would be, as you described, our land. So I think it won't be left out. Then we'll have to address and look at the opportunities for making change.
Connor, got a question?
Thanks, Chair. Is that on? Yeah. Thanks for your presentation. Brilliant. Thank you. I'm unashamedly parochial in my approach to these. I'm a health improvement type of person, and I was immediately drawn to the amber in the performance framework. Could you give us an idea about, so quote, an approach to partnership working with other groups needed to develop following the COVID pandemic was the response to the fact that it doesn't look like any movement happened over the health improvement part of the overall plan? Page 27.
Okay. Sorry.
17. Yes,
17. Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Found it now. Yeah. That is something that we do need to develop. COVID has slowed things down, but that is an area that we do need to look at how we make those links with those groups and develop a working partnership with them to deliver things. So yes, it is something we do need to deliver still.
Yeah, you've just repeated what I've just said. So what I suppose I'm getting at is that is there an action plan under that commentary?
No, we haven't got anything for that yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. More of a maybe a request or a statement than a question per se. I think it's useful having the red, amber, green statuses. What would be useful for a further update, though, is what was it previously versus what is it now, so that we can see any slippage, just in case, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's point noted. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we'll go to comments. If people want to make a comment on the paper, please. That's Goldie.
I think I probably already made it, but I will express my enthusiasm for seeing Old Down named in the priorities for this year, and look forward to a timeline tomorrow.
Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Really, I'm sort of backing Councillor Voe and her point around accessibility for disabled people, specifically those blind. But for myself, I have a daughter who uses a wheelchair, and it does become, in wintertime, it can become hard for her to access any of the outdoors. If we think about Crabtree, in the wintertime, it's mainly the path itself, which then restricts where she can go to explore nature. If I think of the Spinney around Rooksdown, for some reason they felt necessary to throw a load of chippings down to make it more accessible to people, a little less uneven, but it just means it catches in the wheels of my daughter's wheelchair and makes it hard going to access the Spinney, which is right on our doorstep. So having those considerations for the wider outdoors, but also Scope are also doing a Let's Play Fair campaign and about inclusive play parks. So I'd be keen for officers on the relevant cabinet member to explore how they can get involved with that campaign and potentially bring Scope in to have a conversation about making our areas more accessible for those with disabilities.
Thank you. Building on what Alex has just said, I think toilets are really important. I know they're a pain to build and a pain to clean, but they are so important, particularly for older people and disabled people. Otherwise, they simply can't use the spaces. I have a couple of other comments, please. The tree policy. I'm a huge fan of trees. We have a lot of them in Winklebury. We also have a lot of problems with them in Winklebury. And I was talking to Councillor Vokes just now about there's lots of protection in the council for the trees and for the buildings, but not so much for the people. So when it comes to a tree that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's completely overhanging somebody's garden, and they say, what do I do about it? And the answer is, well, you can't cut it back because then it'll just grow more vigorously. And then, what are we going to do? Are we going to let it continue for the next 20 years, getting bigger? It would be great to start thinking this through, because it's going to get become a bigger problem for Basingstoke rather than a smaller one. But I am a huge fan of trees, and it's great that you're planting them. Building on Councillor Slimmon's point about pieces of land that are not owned by the council, please could we engage with local landowners and farmers more? Because there's so much that they could do, and so much that they used to do, but many of them aren't doing it anymore. Particularly things like scorching the ground, and whereas they could allow the edges of fields for wildlife. And the last thing is, hang on a minute, just checking. And the last thing is greater engagement. You've made a space. I think it's number 23. The quality of green space, and just going back to something that was said earlier about the small spaces. You know, particularly thinking in Winklebury, places like Kenilworth Road, where we've got lots of small spaces that people look out on all day, every day, because they are in the middle of their houses, but they get unkempt. You know, they were built decades ago with shrubs that now don't need to be there anymore. And for people that walk out onto that every single day and look at it from their window every single day, it's something that would make a huge difference. Even if we had a slightly innovative approach about getting the community to take some sort of ownership of working out what to do with it, it would be brilliant if we could deal with that. And sorry, the last point I wanted to make, going back to the tree thing, it's good to hear developers saying that they want to plant more trees. Talking to Carla Holmes, for example, at Worting House, they were saying, well, we want to plant a tree in every garden, which is a lovely aspiration, but I'm just hoping that we're making sure that they plant the right trees in the right places so that we don't end up with the problems we've got in Winklebury again. Thank you.
Any other comments anyone wants to make? Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just the biodiversity improvement zone as a demonstration for how we might manage other areas in the borough. I would encourage us to rapidly expand that as fast as possible to cover as much of the borough as we possibly can, because projects like this are hugely important for maintaining, I mean, as the report says, species that are varied and numerous in scope, and there's a huge benefit to improving biodiversity, even in back gardens, small areas of land, let alone across vast swathes like we have control over. So the quicker we can do it, the better.
Thank you. Any other comments? Are you happy to accept the note at the end? No one has anything further to add? Okay. So if what we need to do is the recommendation is to the committee to note the work undertaken during years 3 and 4 of the Green Infrastructure Strategy 2018. Are you happy to agree? Agree. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming along, Councillor Tomlin and Mr. Johnson. The announcement that we have got a workshop came out yesterday by email, yesterday morning, and that's on the 2nd of August at 6:30. So everyone is invited to attend that, all members, where we will talk about the biodiversity strategy, and I'm sure there'll be lots of input. So thank you very much for your presentation, for your time this evening. And I'm sure that we welcome the next update, which will be coming along in a few months' time. Thank you. Okay, right, the next item on the agenda is the work programme, which is before you. There have been some things added at committees' briefings, and the work programme is in front of you. Anyone got any questions about the work programme or comments? Yes, Councillor Lee.
So I think you may not have seen your emails today. Councillor Compton-Burnett has raised or requested that the wellbeing strategy come forward to the committee alongside or turning that into a health and wellbeing strategy rather than just the wellbeing. I think they work in tandem together. I've tentatively agreed with her to bring it, but it relies on reaching out to the relevant officers and cabinet members to agree to bring that forward, and also to make a combined effort on joining the two together.
Yeah, I fully agree, Councillor Lee. I've spoken to Councillor Mackay about it. Unfortunately, he's not available today. And I know that we're going to be discussing this and talking to BVA about other things attached to it. So there is work going. And yes, it isn't in the programme because it didn't come up at the meeting, but obviously we do appreciate, so it will be in the programme as soon as it can be ready to go. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Councillor Bowman and Councillor Euchre.
Thanks, Chair. Just two things. I was surprised that the leisure park and the aquadrome isn't coming until January, which I presume is January 2024. It does say January 2023, but I'm presuming it means next year. That seems a heck of a long time ahead, and I wondered if it was possible to bring that forward so CEP can have some interaction about shaping that. And community safety. We usually have at CEP a really interesting interaction with our community safety team and a representative of our local police force, which is really, really helpful, I think, in bringing together ward issues and community safety and our local police force. So it would be lovely to see that in the forward agenda as well.
I think they actually had a meeting just before earlier this year with the police people attended. Yes, so yes, I'm sure that will be something that people will welcome again. I know that certain people are looking for antisocial behaviour, for example, and that might be part of it as well. And obviously we'll bear in mind the comments that you've made. I don't know why the leisure park has been put back, but I think it's because there's lots of work still being done on it, and I don't think people are quite ready to come forward to this committee yet. But that's an assumption I made because I'm not in the cabinet. Okay, any other comments? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to see on here, and don't know why there isn't, there's nothing to do with waste and recycling on here, and given where we are with the Serco contract, a project plan for retendering that or not, or all the different options there, everything that's going on with county in relation to the changes of government, and there's a hell of a lot going on, and this committee should be part of that. And it's a huge thing, and it's not just going to be one paper, it's going to be something over a period of time, and I would have thought we would have at least had an introduction and something coming up in September or by the latest November.
I understand they are talking about the contract with Serco, and there will be obviously papers coming forward, but I don't think, again, we've got a time frame for that yet. But as soon as there is something that will come forward, I'm sure Mr. Payne will be able to elucidate how long that is away. But again, that's going to be something that will go to Cabinet, and then we can obviously scrutinise it as well.
Okay, but I would like to know a timeline. I would like it noted there should be stuff ongoing, and before we know it, the agenda's going to get full, and this is quite an important thing that affects all residents, and it should be shown on the forward plan.
The office is going to help.
I think it might be going to scrutiny, but we'll note the point and see what's happening with it, which one is going to.
I think we would all welcome more recycling in the borough. I know that we have got lots of people asking for more things. I know there's various things that government are doing, so I'm pretty sure there will be something coming forward very soon. But obviously, we've got to wait for all that information to come forward. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Just two quick things. On the programme of work right at the bottom, it says health and wellbeing social care partners. Is that covered in the health and wellbeing strategy that we were just talking about before? Brilliant. Thank you. And the other thing is, in the last meeting, we and it's minuted. It was suggested that a full list of policies and strategies scheduled for review by the committee would be useful. It would be great if we could have that list, even if there aren't any dates on it. It would be lovely to see what was coming up, so we could start doing some homework.
Yes, I agree. We did discuss that at the last meeting and say that we would like to see a list of all the different strategies and when they might be due for renewal. That would be helpful to have a calendar to make sure that we don't miss anything out. Thank you. Turn it off. Any other questions? Any other comments? Are you happy to accept the word programme as presented with some, obviously, questions about additions that we will add to as they come along? Okay. Right, I don't believe there are any urgent matters this evening, so I think that is the end of the meeting. And thank you all for coming, and have a good summer, because we won't meet again now till, I think it's the 13th of September, which seems an awful long way away. But obviously we will meet tomorrow as a council for the council meeting. So thank you very much this evening, and for being a very well behaved and polite committee. Thank you very much.